So in lesson 4, let's turn to the question of why the number of intervals in scales are so limited. Why are we limited to 5-note scales, 7-note scales that are in use today and have been for centuries? What's the reason for that? So to answer that question, let's go back to a slide I showed you before, which is really the theme of the whole module today and of the previous module on consonants, and that is that scales today are a consequence of harmonic overlap. And that's what I just finished telling you, that the scales that we like are the ones that have high harmonic overlap and therefore a strong correspondence, a strong association with human vocalizations. So let's look at the 12 intervals, 13 notes of the chromatic scale, and I showed you this diagram before. This is a harmonic series of the fundamental indicated by these white symbols here. So let's say this was a musical tone with a fundamental of 100 hertz, then this harmonic would be 200, 300 hertz, 400 hertz, and so on. And the issue here in harmonic overlap that we talked about before, and that I'm talking about again now, is can the small number of notes that are present in scales be defined or explained in terms of their degree of harmonic overlap. So here is a blow up in this of just a single octave in this harmonic series, and all of these other colored symbols, as I told you before, indicate the other intervals of the chromatic scale. So you can see from this that the playing of unison is complete harmonic correspondence. Every time you play two notes together, every single harmonic of the two notes is in correspondence. When you play an octave, and this would be the white symbols and the red symbols, then it's the case that every other harmonic in the two notes is in correspondence. When you play a major fifth, that's the orange symbol here, every third harmonic in the two notes is overlapping, and so on down the list of the notes that are relatively more or less consonant in the chromatic scale series. So what does this mean with respect to the question of why it is that we have a relatively small number of tones in the scales that are popularly used, 5 intervals, 7 intervals, and so on? So the reason is that as you introduce other intervals, you begin to introduce harmonics that don't overlap with any of the harmonics in the tonic. So let's look at this. So here the brown symbols are indicating note combinations where there is overlap with the tonic harmonics. And the yellow symbols indicate the harmonics of the notes that don't correspond to any of the harmonics of the tonic. And you can see that as you generate more intervals in a scale, necessarily you introduce more and more harmonics, the yellow symbols, that don't correspond with any of the harmonics in the tonic, these harmonics that are diagrammed here. So there's a trade-off between the introduction of notes that correspond, that are consonant, that have high correspondence with the tonic, even though they begin to introduce intervals that don't have any correspondence with the harmonics of the tonic, and that trade-off begins to lose vocal similarity. So the more notes that you introduce into a scale, the more you reduce the vocal similarity, and the more the scale begins to lose its ability to signify human vocalization. So there's no limit in principle to the number of notes that you can introduce into a scale. And different composers have tried to introduce, large numbers of notes in scales. There's a 31 note scale, there's an 81 note scale that people have tried to use, but of course they're not popular or widely used, and the reason is that very quickly after you've introduced 7 intervals, you quickly begin to lose the yellow symbols here in this diagram begin to outweigh the brown symbols, the correspondences, and vocal similarity as you go beyond 7 notes 7 intervals in the scale, or 8 notes, in a heptatonic scale, diatonic scale, you very rapidly lose vocal similarity, and losing the vocal similarity is what, in a biological explanation, this is really all about.